And so let's get into it. So free your mind and your ass will follow. Banned in the USA, diverse children's picture books, young adult books, intersectionality, and the struggle for inclusion. So this is, some of my goals here today, a call to action to apply critical race theory, intersectionality, and critical media literacy, to analyze systems of oppression related to the banning of books, understanding white supremacy, and also understanding the societal, political, revisionist histories, anti-intellectualism, to analyze and build upon the research of PEN America with a focus on literature and human rights. The attack and toll on BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, students, teachers, librarians, and to comprehend free your mind and your ass will follow the decolonization process. So I want to share some background and how this work came to be, just conceptualizing the work. And what do I mean by free your mind and your ass will follow? Well, first of all, it was a popular song by Parliament and Funkadelic, and as well as other artists. I love music. So that line, that title has always stayed with me. And what does it mean? What does free your mind and your ass will follow mean? So it's this process, the way I'm interpreting it, of decolonizing our minds, the decolonial process of the mind, actively engaged in critical thinking, reading, engagement, activism. And then for me, there's some foundational people here with this free your mind and your ass will follow. The visionaries of freedom, these Afrofuturists who predicted or who understood that there is a better way of life, there is freedom, there is liberation, there's empowerment. And from history, I am just addicted to this woman from history, Harriet Tubman, who had a vision, this Afrofuturist, a vision of freedom. When the law said that Africans who were enslaved in America and beyond, that you're supposed to be enslaved. No, she had another vision. So she is very inspirational to this free your mind and your ass will follow, because she said, you'll be free or you're going to die. You'll be free or die. And so I'm really inspired by her life, that she would risk it going back and forth over and over to lead Africans to freedom in America. The next visionary is Frantz Fanon, the psychotherapist, liberator, activist, scholar, Black-skinned, white mask on heavy rotation in my mind, along with Harriet Tubman. Also, The Wretched of the Earth. These are some seminal works that he has written in this, what I'm calling decolonial process, freeing our minds and the asses will follow. Also, with the conceptual framework is critical race theory. And it's been in the news, and I love it. Critical race theory explained the central idea is CRT. We focus on racism, and it's institutionalized and how it's embedded in America's history, legal systems, and policies. It acknowledges the continuing impacts of slavery and segregation in America and critiques how institutionalized racism perpetuates a caste system that is inherently unequal. There are 5 principles, core tenets of CRT, but today I'm just focused on the importance of experienced knowledge. We believe in the narrative, those experiences, the storytelling, the biographies, the parables, the family histories. The list goes on. Those stories from people of color, BIPOC, are crucial to understanding racism and changing the American society for the better. Now, keep that in mind as I move forth in this presentation by looking at what's being attacked. Look at the faces, not just the stories and experiences, but also look at the faces. We're not colorblind in this presentation. We are actually looking at people and their stories and experiences through narrative and who and what is being attacked. So defining another component of this presentation, intersectionality by Kimberly Crenshaw, lawyer, civil rights advocate, intersectional feminist. She's this law professor who coined the term in 1989 explaining intersectional feminism as a prism for seeing the way in which various forms of inequality often operate together and exacerbate each other. So given that framework, I want to focus on the legacy of colonialism, power and domination, revisionist histories and anti-intellectualism, reflections on America, the impact of this white supremacist political climate, this power and its draconian policies, what's going on in America socially and politically, targeting knowledge and access to knowledge. Why? Why now? Is it going to get worse as we get into the political season and voting for the next president? Global neighbors, I ask you, and I want you to think about this throughout the presentation. What's happening in your country around some of these issues around human rights and access to knowledge and literature? So also think about this too. There's a human toil. There's a financial, emotional, educational, intellectual toil. What is the impact on writers, students, teachers, librarians, and independent bookstores? Maybe there's feelings of oppression, not feeling safe, possibility of job loss, reports of job loss, not being represented in text and curriculum. And then this idea of wanting to be in need of sustainable, culturally responsive teaching and learning spaces and resources. So in doing this work, I'm really fascinated by what PEN America is about and what they've done so far in regards to literacy, access to knowledge, human rights issues. It stands at the intersection of literature and human rights to protect free expression in the U.S. and worldwide. They champion the freedom to write, recognizing the power of the word to transform the world. Their mission is to unite writers and their allies to celebrate creative expression and defend the liberties that make it possible. It was founded in 1922. It's the largest of more than 100 centers worldwide that make up the PEN International Network. It works to ensure that people everywhere have freedom to create literature, to convey information and ideas, to express their views, and to access the views, ideas, and literatures of others. Also, it defends writers, artists, and journalists and protect free expression worldwide. It includes research and reports on topical issues, and I'll be sharing some of that today. It's a registered 501c3 with headquarters in New York, offices in LA and DC. So as I think about some of the questions I've posed here in the context, there's reflections on classes that I've taught, pedagogy, curriculum, and text. Over the years, I've taught African-American children's literature, African-American literature, race and contemporary society, introduction to ethnic studies, a whole host of special education, research classes, education classes, visual and performing arts. Also, something that's also a part of my framework is the utilization of this critical media literacy framework. The questions particularly come in handy in my classes as I engage students around media literacy and the politics of representation and beyond. What values, points of view, and ideologies are represented in children's books, young adult books, in art and beyond? What's missing? Who created it? Whom does this text advantage? I love using this framework in my class. Dr. Jeff Scher, I received this from him. He helped to create it. It's a great resource for your pedagogy. Something else that's very important for me too, as I get into children's literature, which I've studied 25 to 30 years, telling on myself my age, but I'm grateful for every year. But this book right here by Donna Ray McCann, White Supremacy in Children's Literature. This is an amazing book. If you don't have it, please add it to your library. But it's a foundational book that I use along with this concept. It says this penetrating study of the white supremacy myth in books for the young adds an important dimension to American intellectual history. The study pinpoints an intersecting adult and child culture. It demonstrates that many children's stories had political, literary, and social contexts that parallel the way adult books, schools, churches, and government institutions malign Black identity, culture, and intelligence. The book reveals how links between the socialization of children and conservative trends in the 19th century foretold 20th century disregard for social justice and American social policy. Now, let me say that sentence one more time, but substitute the 21st century. The book reveals how links between the socialization of children and conservative trends in the 21st century foretold all of the centuries prior disregard for social justice and American social policy. The author demonstrates that cultural pluralism, an ongoing corrective to white supremacist fabrications, is informed by the insights and historical assessments offered in the study. So in using this approach, I'm really interested in the intersectional authors challenging oppression, those books banned in the USA, books that I currently use in my classroom, books that I've used over the years, now, and like I said, over the years. And so it's really important as we look at some of these examples of the books that are being banned. And also keep in mind, let me reiterate, the voices and experiences through the authors and illustrators who are writing these books, the Black, Indigenous people of color, their voices are mattering. Let's never lose sight of that. So in looking at the books that are being banned, intersectional themes, multiple layers of intersectionality, race, class, gender, sexuality, ability, immigration, and beyond. These are some of the themes of the books that are being banned. So again, what are some of the examples? George Johnson, all boys aren't blue. Going back to critical race theory and challenging white supremacist grand narratives. We do that in critical race theory. As I've mentioned, the voices of BIPOC people matter. So let's think about this theme, all boys aren't blue, dealing with gender and sexuality. So George Johnson, he responded on why this book is frequently challenged. He says here from the I.P.E.S website, it's being challenged so ardently because my book is telling the truth. And we know that the U.S. has always had an issue with any type of text that tells the truth. Whether we are talking about the origins of this country through genocide and through slavery, or whether we're talking about how the forefathers were slave owners themselves and were actually terrible people, this country has had a way of creating an alternative truth around some of their greatest heroes, as well as an alternative truth just around what the actual narrative of America is. And so when I put a text out into the world that is a Black, queer, coming of age story that tells the truth about what actually happens to Black children in school systems, or what actually happens to Black queer children in school systems who have had to deal with the intersection of race and identity and sexuality, all while fighting many of the oppressions of anti-Blackness and racism. And we call out those truths and we speak truth into power. It makes people fearful. It makes people worried about the next generation, which is the youth, how they'll actually operate from a space of knowing what the actual truth of many of our stories are of the people who are around them, rather than a truth they have been sold. This country is anti-queer. This country is anti-Black. And anytime you have a text that has the intersection of both of those, I think it just makes it the primary target number one. So this is very important. This quote from Mr. Johnson is very important. Why? Because it parallels what critical race theory is trying to do, what it's doing. It is recognizing these grand narratives that are accepted as truth, oftentimes from a white supremacist perspective. But now we're saying no. It is time for Black, Indigenous people of color, for their voices and experiences to be acknowledged. And now we see backlash, pulled from bookshelves in schools, libraries. Another person, Toni Morrison, The Bluest Eye, classic book, banned in the USA. Maya Angelou from my home state of Arkansas. She's from Stamps, Arkansas. I know why the caged bird sings. And still I rise. Banned in America in some schools. Not all of them. If you go, we have resources for you. You can look at where exactly books are being banned and how they're being banned. Jacqueline Woodson, a Black, queer, prolific writer. Many of her books are banned. Each Kindness, a book about kindness. Each Kindness, banned. A book about a brown girl dreaming, banned. The House You Pass on the Way and the Secrets Within That House, banned. The Day You Begin, in English and Spanish, banned. One of my favorite books dealing with immigration, Miss Morales and Dreamers. Everybody has a dream. America founded on a dream, banned in the U.S.A. Hey Black Child, a book dealing with the self-esteem of a Black child, banned. Out of Darkness, dealing with issues of race, class, gender, and sexuality in Texas. Professor Ashley Hope Perez, her book is banned, particularly in Texas. And once you start looking at some of the PEN data, Texas is, and I think Florida is a close second. Texas is the state that bans the most. Skin Like Mine, an appreciation of your skin tone, banned. Between Us and Abuela, Grandmother, a family story from the border, banned by this book by Miss Perkins. Jessica Love, Julian is a Mermaid, Julian at the Wedding, her books, Gender and Sexuality, banned. Pride by Rob Sanders, the story of Harvey Milk and the rainbow flag. It's sure enough going to be banned. You see the faces. Anything dealing with race, gender, and sexuality have been overwhelmingly banned by many school districts in the U.S. Oh, and we have Dr. Pedro Noguera, his book, The Trouble with Black Boys and Other Reflections on Race, Equity, and the Future of Public Education. His book is also banned in certain places and spaces. Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Dr. Kendi, banned. I wonder why, being very facetious and sarcastic here, you understand, you see the faces, you see the work. Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, banned. You all know this is a seminal book, banned. So the research and data from PEN, from their website, 3,362, the instances of book bans that PEN recorded in the 2022-2023 school year. They have a methodology for looking at the book bans. And again, you'll be able to have access to these resources, these links that I'm providing from PEN and beyond. But PEN has an index of book bans for 21-22 school year. It lists where students' access to books in school, libraries, and classrooms in the U.S. was restricted or diminished for either limited or indefinite periods. Some of these bans have been rescinded and some remain in place. PEN America defines a school book ban as any action taken against a book based on its content and as a result of parent or community challenges, administrative decisions, or in response to direct or threatened action by lawmakers or other governmental officials that leads to a previously accessible book being either completely removed from availability to students or where access to a book is restricted or diminished. PEN America analyzed all relevant news stories on challenges, restrictions, and bans to school library books, curriculum, and classroom libraries anywhere in the U.S. during the 21-22 school year. They consulted school district websites. They corresponded with librarians, authors, and teachers, and reviewed letters to school districts organized by the National Coalition Against Censorship. This book ban from PEN does not include every instance in which a book has been challenged, as not all challenges have ended in bans. Rather, it offers a count of books banned in accordance with the definitions and categories described. Here, when you go to the I.P.E.S website, it shows you the key for the indexing of the bands. Some findings from their report. They have a report there, and please make sure that you look at their report. Banned in the U.S.A, the growing movement to censor books in schools, July to December 2022. They have this report and they have key findings. During the first half of the 2022-2023 school year, PEN America's Index of School Book Bans lists 1,477 instances of individual books banned, affecting 874 unique titles. That's an increase of 28% compared to the prior 6 months of January through June of 2022. The school year instances of book bans are most prevalent in Texas, Florida, Missouri, Utah, and South Carolina. These bans are driven by a confluence of local actors and state-level policy. The implications of bans in these 5 states are far-reaching as policies and practices are molded and replicated across the country. Let me remind you, there's a human toll to students, their families, librarians, teachers, independent bookstores. Overwhelmingly from the key findings, book bans continue to target stories by and about people of color and LGBTQ+ individuals. In this 6-month period, 30% of the unique titles banned are about books about race, racism, or feature characters of color. Meanwhile, 26% of unique titles banned have LGBTQ+ characters or themes. More key findings. Due to the cases where long lists of books are removed for further investigation, bans this school year are increasingly affecting a wider swath of titles, including those that portray violence and abuse, discuss topics of health and well-being, and cover death and grief. Can you imagine? Let's repeat this again. Those titles that portray violence and abuse, 44%. Discussions about health and well-being, 38%. Now you have to ask, what in the world, why would you want to keep information about health and well-being? Now, if you know me, that's a rhetorical question, but we're a brilliant crowd here. You understand what's going on. Death and grief, 30%. So this illuminates how censorship impacts a wide array of books, particularly as school districts respond to vague legislation by removing a large number of books prior to any formal review. Another key finding is the process behind book challenges and bans is evolving. During the 2021-2022 school year, parent-led groups, conservative parent-led groups coordinated to advance book censorship. These groups pressured districts to remove books without following their own policies, even in some cases, removing books without reading them. Now, that is not anti-intellectualism and not steeped in research. I don't know what is. You're removing a book without ever reading it. Banned in the U.S.A, welcome. Books are more frequently labeled pornographic or indecent. Dozens of books were targeted for removal in the 2021-2022 school year on the basis that they contain sexual content. But since last summer, according to PEN, this framing has become an increasing focus on activists and politicians to justify removing books that do not remotely fit the well-established legal and colloquial definitions of pornography. Rhetoric about porn in schools has also been justified for the passage or introduction of new state laws, some of which would bar any books with sexual content and could easily sweep up a wide swath of literature and health-related content. Last key finding, the full impact of the book ban movement is greater than can be counted as wholesale bans or restricting access to untold numbers of books in classrooms and school libraries. This year, numerous states enacted wholesale bans in which entire classrooms and school libraries have been suspended, closed, or emptied of books, either permanently or temporarily. It makes me sad. Can you imagine what our children in schools, what they are missing from these bans? Entire libraries emptied of books. This is largely because teachers and librarians in several states have been directed to catalog entire collections for public scrutiny within short time frames under threat of punishment from new vague laws. These wholesale bans have involved the culling of books that were previously available to students in ways that are impossible to track or quantify. Impossible to track or quantify. The state of book bans in the USA, Penn gives an overview here. They talk about in previous ban reports, the movement to ban books that has grown since 2021 is deeply undemocratic as it seeks to impose restrictions on all students and families. Students and families suffer based on the preferences of a few parents or community members. I wonder who those few parents or community members are and their preferences. Right? The nature of this movement is not one of isolated challenges to books by parents in different communities. Rather, it is an organized effort by advocacy groups and state politicians with the ultimate aim of limiting access to certain stories, perspectives, and information. Limiting access to certain stories, perspectives, and information. So we continue on. This is oppression. It's systemic oppression. And so you see it in the news. For example, this article here, anti-critical race theory laws are working. Teachers are thinking twice about how they talk about race. And not just teachers. If you're down south and working in one of these states, South Carolina and Texas, what's the other one? Florida. You may be scared as a university professor. I don't even know if you can talk about it. You may not get tenure. This is the toil, the financial, emotional, educational, psychological toil of systemic oppression. An Oklahoma teacher fought the book banning job. What is it? The Oklahoma teacher fought the book banning right and lost her job. So these are real concerns, real struggles in dealing with systemic oppression. There has been some progress. Glad to know that my state, our state, from many of our audience members are here from the state of California. It becomes the first state to require ethnic studies in high school where you get to study some of these books that have been banned. The law passed in 2021. It's effective for the 2025-2026 academic year. Then we have Illinois, Pritzker. The governor signs a bill making Illinois the first state in the nation to outlaw book bans. Now, right here in my own neighborhood, not too far from where I live, Pasadena, California. Yes, California is, known for many things, being at the forefront. But I also want to highlight and be critical that there are things going on in California that we need to be concerned about too, with independent bookstores, particularly this independent Black-owned bookstore, woman-owned bookstore, Octavia's Bookshelf, which is recently opened, and I guess in the last year or so, located in Pasadena, California, an independent bookstore highlighting BIPOC authors. This is what she put on Instagram. August 19th, we will be closed tomorrow. The safety of our booksellers and customers will always be our top priority. It is with that value in mind, we made the decision to close our store tomorrow. Stay safe out there. October 19th, a little over a week ago, another post. Attention, we're closing early today. This man right here came into our store today to harass and intimidate our staff. We've contacted the police, but we're pretty shaken up and we'll be closing up tomorrow. Now, let me point it out to you again. Black-owned, woman-owned. And you got people like this coming in and threatening them, threatening her way of life, threatening in regards to social justice and the access to books and information by and for and beyond people of color, BIPOC. So I just want to keep it real with you that there are safety concerns, real life safety concerns for people, independent bookstores and beyond, librarians, school teachers, everyone. Safety is at hand here, but we still continue with this free your mind and your ass will follow. We still continue the good fight, the good trouble, right? So I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm still continuing with this decolonial process. But I also want to say activism is a part of it too. We got to get out there and be heard. If we need to, we're going to get in these streets and be heard. We never should lose sight on freeing our minds, and this ask will follow, even if it means hitting the streets and protesting. I want to share with you what keeps me motivated, what gives me energy based on the ancestors, based on their words, based on what they had to go through. I find comfort and strength. James Baldwin, the fire next time. Anything by Toni Morrison, anything by James Baldwin. And as I'm speaking in real time, Audre Lorde, how in the world could I forget her? Audre Lorde. Black feminist thought, Patricia Hill Collins. Knowledge, consciousness, and the politics of empowerment. Free your mind and your ass will follow. Read the literature, engage in the literature. Salons with your friends, your community. If we can't go to the schools to get the education, we can set up shop in our houses. Look at this world from feminist studies. Look at this world as a classroom. Look at your salon from the Harlem Renaissance, your living room, your salon as a learning space, right? Go to the bookstores, buy from them, keep them in business, lift them up and encourage them, send them messages on Instagram and social media saying, I got you. We're coming in. We're going to support you. Don't let this get you down. Bell hooks, anything by bell hooks, feminist theory from margin to center, freeing my mind and letting my ass follow. Ain't I a woman? Black women and feminism. Feminism is for everybody. Passionate politics. Let's get excited. Let's get angry. Let's do something. Let's galvanize. Let's motivate, right? Passionate politics. Again, bell hooks, teaching to transgress, education as the practice of freedom, teaching critical thinking, practical wisdom, critical race theory, the key writings that formed the movement, seeing race again, countering colorblindness across the disciplines, also looking at faces at the bottom of the well. That was a key piece by Derek Bell. Yes, here it is. Derek Bell, Faces at the Bottom of the Well, The Permanence of Racism. Dr. Jeff Scher and Doug Kellner. Yes, the Critical Media Literacy Guide, Engaging Media and Transforming Education. Media literacy is elementary. Teaching youth to critically read and create media, right? Also helping with this decolonial process. Black feminism and qualitative inquiry. A mosaic for writing our daughters' bodies. Dr. Venus Evans Winters, Recovering Black Storytelling and Qualitative Research. Dr. Tolliver, Futures of Data Analysis and Qualitative Research. Intersectional Analysis as a Method to Analyze Pop Culture, Clarity in the Matrix. Dr. Esposito and Dr. Edwards. Thinking about how we, in the ivory tower and beyond, how can we use this research? How can we think about being in the street, using activism, bringing attention to what's going on through participatory means, youth participatory action research, right, and beyond. Also in this journey, this lifelong journey of freeing the mind and the ass will follow. Decolonial feminist research, haunting, remembering, and mothers. Making space for indigenous feminisms, decolonizing methodologies, research and indigenous people, why indigenous literatures matter, for Out of the Damn Keith Justice, The New Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Color Blindness. Oh, one of my personal favorites for decades. One of the first books that resonated with me in the late 90s, early 2000s, going to graduate school at UCLA. But Schooling in Capitalist America, its function, its purpose, educational reform, and the contradictions of economic life. And oftentimes it's our Black and brown children suffering in these capitalistic reproductive schools. Lessons in liberation. So we know about schooling in capitalist America. So what are we going to do to liberate ourselves? Lessons in liberation, an abolitionist toolkit for educators. We want to do more than just survive. Abolitionist teaching and the pursuit of educational freedom. So books by Bettina Love and the Abolitionist Network. Also looking at white fragility, why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. Why is it so hard, right? But also, look, I'm hoping let's also move beyond just to talk about it and deconstructing the grand narratives of white supremacy too. Maybe that's the book I need to write. Deconstructing white supremacy's grand narratives, historical and contemporary narratives. Then we have Gholdy Muhammad, Cultivating Genius, an equity framework for culturally and historically responsive literacy. Then this latest book by Gholdy, Unearthing Joy, a guide to culturally, historically responsive teaching and learning. So yes, we need culturally responsive and sustainable teaching and learning pedagogies. These are some tools. Now, reflection time. I want to know, global neighbors, what's going on in your country around these issues around literacy and access and books and human rights, white supremacy, anti-intellectualism, revisionist histories. How can you use critical race theory as well as critical media literacy in understanding BIPOC students' voices and their experiences, mattering in your planning and your curriculum instruction in your classes? For example, your syllabi, your reading selections, your instructional choices. For the global community, beyond just teachers, what are your action steps? What are our action steps in regards to social justice around these issues? Now, with that said, I have provided you some resources. Feel free to utilize these resources. I think they're going to be in the chat for you. This is what I've used in constructing this presentation, but more than just a presentation, a call to action. Free your mind and your ass will follow the decolonizing process of this mind. Now I'm going to stop right now, and I want to say thank you so much for listening to this call for action. And I hope that it has presented some type of information for you to hold on to. I thank you for participating.
Thank you, Dr. Amina. Thank you so much. We'd like to open up the floor. Dr. Amina has provided so much to us and invites us to a call to action to engage in a dialogue, to engage in these reflections and think about what will we do to move beyond this aspect of thinking about things and just what can we do? She mentioned that might mean getting into the streets. She provided ample literature and several guiding questions. Is there anyone in the room that would like to offer a question while we have Dr. Amina Humphrey here with us, or a comment or reflection as well? Let's open up the floor, either for the chat or if you'd like to unmute yourself.
A mí me gustaría hacer por ahí un comentario. Primero, muchas gracias, doctora, por su exposición súper clara, súper completa. Es increíble la realidad que usted está comentando en relación, estamos en pleno 2023 y hay libros que están, como dice usted, siendo prohibidos en su país, principalmente en el sur. Libros que cuentan realidades, historias, hay colores, hay cuerpos, hay vivencias que pareciera que para cierto grupo no merecen mostrarse, no merecen aparecer, ¿no? Me quedé pensando en eso, en cómo, por ahí mi primera pregunta sería, ¿por qué en el sur, ¿no? Justo por ahí en mi caso yo no vivo en Estados Unidos, más o menos conozco un poquito la historia, pero ¿por qué cree o por qué usted considera que lo menciona en su exposición? ¿Por qué en el sur del país se da principalmente esta censura, ¿no? Hacia otras vivencias, otros colores, otros cuerpos, ¿no? Que no sean justamente ese cuerpo blanco. Que por ahí pensando en esta herramienta que es la interseccionalidad nos permite ver que muchas veces esos feminismos que están rondando en el mainstream son esos, son blancos, clase alta, ¿no? Profesionales. Pero la pregunta sería, ¿por qué en el sur? ¿Por qué se da ahí principalmente o por qué usted considera que es más en ese espacio en base a lo que por ahí venía escuchando? Muchas gracias.
Yeah, Dr. Amina? We need to have a
I caught the tail end. I see Dr. Sher here put you can hear interpretation in English. So I caught the tail end. And so can you tell me the question, Dr. Gambino?
Let me see right here if we can actually
So the main question is, why is this racism so centralized in the southern part of the United States? Why in the South?
Oh, okay. Thank you for that question. So you have to understand the history of America. You have to understand Africans brought to America through the transatlantic slave trade. And you take yourself and you transport yourself to another period in time during slavery, right? The antebellum South. And so you look at the numbers of Black people who were brought here, and they worked in places such as Mississippi, Texas, the Carolinas, right? And so there's a concentration of Black people in the United States going to the legacy of slavery, right? And so you ask, how does that impact us today? Well, these former slaveholding states still have some of that slaveholding mentality in their minds, their rhetoric, their policies, their practices, right? And so, yeah, I wish I had the list in front of me, but what I remember from Penn is Texas, it's Florida, it's the Carolinas. I even saw Pennsylvania there, which was surprising to me. You have a number of conservatives there too, as well, conservative evangelicals as well, who they don't want you to talk about issues of gender, sexuality, the LGBT plus population. They don't want you to talk about white supremacy. You know, in Florida, they're making the statements, the revisionist statements that what is this? They call him DeSantis, and my crew calls him the Satan. So DeSantis out of Florida. DeSantis, I think, recently said that Africans benefited from slavery, right? So they're putting forth these types of toxic, traumatizing narratives. And then who has the power to create the publishing, the textbooks, the curriculum, right? So I think it's fascinating, the attack on books and the knowledge being produced by people of color, and how that will impact our youth moving forth who live in some of these states, right? And maybe that's a question for the group. I'm going to be quiet. I've talked enough. Let's hear what the group has to say, because I see engagement on your faces.
Let's respond and engage in why the South? Why this mentality? As someone from the South, I'm happy to engage in this. It's difficult. There are so many various perspectives in the South. And yes, like Dr. Amina is mentioning, there is that history. And there's also simultaneous factors going on in the Southern states regarding specifically wanting to have guns and feeling the right to bear arms, right? And so all these things are interlocking, as well as all old mentalities about women as subservient and a lack of inclusion for LGBTQIA plus two-spirit identities. And so all of these things are occurring simultaneously. And so, Dr. Amina, the example that you bring us with what's happening, especially with Miss Nikki right now at Octavia's Bookshelf in Pasadena, California, we're thinking about how these things are happening all over. And I think what you're also bringing us to about what are we going to do about it? We've done a hell of a lot of talk. I know I have in the past several years, right? Especially in deep reflections during COVID-19 lockdowns. And I'm asking myself, what does this look like next? These people's identities are being stripped. Our children don't have access to books that look like them all over the country. And so what are we going to do as an actual enacted practice for abolitionist pedagogy? And so I think that the offering that you bring to us here, this invitation about freeing our mind and letting our ass follow, it has to happen. And so I appreciate how you're bringing this invitation to us. I think it's powerful, it's potent, it's necessary.
Thank you.
Dr. Amina, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. My name is Ronnie Castellanos Raimundo. I use he, they pronouns. Currently work at Cal State Dominguez Hills, running a center called La Casita, which is our Latinx Cultural Resource Centers, which you see here. I want to thank you and express my gratitude, because my brain is just going, obviously I think all of us are trying to think in the ways that we can engage and support this work, but also spread awareness. And so this just reminds me, I come from the land of Guatemala, so my migrating to the United States. And similarly, we continue to see violence right across the world. And it just reminds me of the places where the social political violence continues. So currently, Guatemala is going through a political turmoil, right? Given the recent elections. And I think it's impactful to see how even like the literature, right? Like I'll give you an example. So some of the things that happen is that the one of the groups in the government went inside, right, like their government office where they keep all the ballots for voting, and then just took them out, right? And so it started this political indigenous uprising that has been going on now for almost a month. And so I think for me, it's seeing that not that I'm predicting, but I'm trying to think about like the banning of these books, the banning of knowledge, right? It reminds me of how we are so close to having things censored, even in higher education and other spaces outside of that space. So it reminds me, obviously, of the lack of knowledge or the distortion of knowledge between even what folks are experiencing, the violence in Palestine and just in Central America. And I'm just reflecting on also the impact of anti-Blackness as a framework that has even in Latino communities, right, in Latin America, beyond the United States. And I'm thinking about how anti-Blackness is replicated across not just the U.S., but globally, right? And what maybe our call is to action in our circles, in our communities. So I don't have a specific question right now, but I just wanted to share like some of the things that I'm thinking in the connection that you made so beautifully to express to us the need. And I was like, my ass needs to read more. We always thought I read enough, but I'm being called to truly immerse myself in some of these critical readings. So thank you for your knowledge and your labor.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Ronnie and I have worked together at Dominguez Hills, and he's doing amazing work there. And you bring up some interesting points too as well. Another point I want to address with Octavia's bookshelf, those were just the last couple of months, like this month and then in August. But since she has opened, there has been an assault on the bookstore. I think I read in previous posts someone had broken in, and she didn't have any damage inside the bookstore. I think I read another post earlier in the year, maybe someone had smeared feces on her door of the business. So just know that I only counted 2, recent assaults, but there have been others. And I just want to reiterate how important it is for us to support these spaces, open up our space as the world as a classroom, your living room, your kitchen, the barber shop, the beauty shop, the corner, the hood corner where everybody goes. Think about these educational rich spaces in our communities, because we're going to have to do that given what's going on in our country and countries, right? And then too, in thinking about what Donald Ray McCann had said in this text, if you don't have this text, this is a great text to buy, White Supremacy in Children's Literature. Children's literature is not innocent. It's not removed from the societal context and how we live, right? So think about the themes. Think about what's being banned. A story about the border and immigration. A story about the self-esteem of a Black child. Paulo Freire and freedom. Toni Morrison, as she talks about the bluest eye, right? I mean, the list goes on. Maya Angelou. I know why the cage bird sings, because that bird wants a taste of that freedom. And systemic oppression is constantly doing what it does best, silencing voices, right? So I'm going to stop, but y'all talk to me. I want to hear what you all have to say, really. I've spoken enough. I'd like to hear what everyone here, 13 people, 12 minus myself, but Dr. Cher, Moss, who else? Anna, Victoria, Steve, Camilla, Catalina, talk to us.
So, Dr. Humphrey, I just want to say we don't have too much time, so just a few minutes, but please, I want to encourage people to share. So go ahead.
Where does the time go? Okay.
Dr. Amina, I had a question. With all the onslaught of these banned books, have you seen any development concerning publishers who may be starting to get nervous about publishing these books? And then where do we go from there?
That's a good question. I helped to organize the children's book fair over at Cal State LA for the Ethnic Studies Summit in May. And what I'll say is I'm pleasantly surprised. People are starting to think more about self-publishing. I don't have those ins and outs with the major publishing houses. It would be interesting to follow up and see if anybody would talk to me on the phone about how do you feel about what's going on with the political climate and your publishing house as you produce these books, right? But so I don't know on that end, but I did get some pleasant surprises as people are talking about how they're self-publishing or currently have a self-publishing house. Many of them writers, intellects, doing these self-publishing houses and producing books.
Yeah,
and
that's great.
I also do see it on social media, different parent groups, activists, what is it, woke kindergarten, that, so there are some spaces online where we're seeing activism around these issues and pushing back. Yeah.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Yeah, one thing I've been thinking about too, in addition to what you've described, which is great, is for people like myself who are in tech, with the availability of digital media, we may be at some point in need of preserving a lot of this media for future generations, and that may even have to become a civic activist effort, right? And so I could see tech communities banding together to preserve this kind of material for the next generation, because as much as it tries to be suppressed in print and in physical form, with digital, you have a lot more ability to go under the radar, so to speak.
Mr. Gambino, I like that. We need to build upon that. Making use, yes, you're very right about that. The global use of tech all over the world and access. Yeah, for sure. For sure. For sure. Maybe that's something I can think about it, because I've thought about it for a long time. It's just a matter of time. But building out a website and social media around these types of books and basically what I've talked about today, but putting forth all this information on the website, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Sure. Thank you.
And I see Dr. Gambino with a look of pride on her face.
Proud to introduce my father, Steve Gambino. Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Dr. Humphrey. Yeah, we have time for a couple more thoughts if anybody else would like to share. And then Dr. Amina, if there's anything else you want to offer at the end. Otherwise, I'll close this out. And I want to drop these excellent resources because as Ronnie mentioned too, we got a lot of reading to do, a lot of engagement to do, right? So any other offerings before we go? Oh, and this recording will be made available as well, so we can revisit it after Dr. Amina's review. That's
Victoria, are you still with us? You have any final words? Anybody else? If not, you give me the word and I can just give my moment of gratitude for the opportunity.
okay. All right, Dr. Amina, feel free, and then I'll close it on.
No, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate being able to do this work. It's something that been in my head on the back burner for a long time because I get very emotional. I love books. Can you imagine what our lives would be without reading and access? And then seeing a book cover and that protagonist is a reflection of ourselves and being denied that. You know, if books, like I said, at age 11, I was reading The Color Purple. I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings. I was reading all types of literatures, and to be denied that, it is a true, an egregious error against human rights. And so I think about that for the other children who are being denied that around the world. So I appreciate the opportunity to present this perspective and also the call to action. And I just challenge all of us here to think about what action steps we'll take moving forward with bookstores, supporting our librarians, supporting our teachers, supporting our students and families. And also I challenge us to open up our homes and also public spaces that maybe we don't even think about as an educational space, utilizing those spaces for the word, social justice and the word. And I leave you with that. Action. Free your mind so your ass will follow, and we're taking action.
That's right. Amina, amen. Thank you so much for blessing us with these offerings. Thank you for joining in this conversation. We look forward to your forthcoming actions. Dr. Amina Humphrey, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Everybody take care.
Thank you.